Thinking Hawaii Asian Review. I'm Johnson Choi, the host. Our guest today is Professor Patricio Arbenes. Our topic today is very interesting. It's about the new president of Philippines, Rodriguez Duterte. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Choi.
Okay, before I bring ask Professor some question about the happening in Philippines, maybe I will give a quick recap. Because of the program today, I spent my last month actually go out and did some of my own research, not strictly from the Philippine perspective, but talking to my friends primarily in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. And also, since I spent a lot of time in San Francisco, there's a huge Filipino population in San Francisco. And last year, before I returned to Hawaii, I also spent 3 days in Las Vegas. And surprisingly, there's a lot of Filipino workers in the casinos. So with the program in mind, I do ask a lot of those more like blue-collar type of workers, both in San Francisco and also in Las Vegas. And how do they like about the new president of Philippines? Surprisingly, everybody likes him, just like the poll number in Philippines with a 85% plus approval rate. But when I ask some of the people, but the more elite group, that means those are the businessmen and those are with a strong tie with the American business, and the answer is quite different. They were disappointed. So with that in mind, I guess they are depends on which sector of the population he belongs to. And because what happened in Philippines, and before Donald Trump got elected, a lot of people compare him to Duterte, to the Donald Trump of Philippines. And today I listened to the Taiwan talk show. There's another businessman like Donald Trump in Taiwan who built all the iPhone for Apple. And people speculating that in 2020, he may want to run for president of Taiwan. And so it looks like the old tradition, career politicians have to watch out because maybe the tide has changed. Okay, Professor. Do you have anything that you want to add to my comment?
Well, President Duterte likes President-elect Trump for one reason, that they swear.
Oh, okay.
But if you compare their political careers to each other, they're very much far different. Duterte comes from a political family. Mr. Trump doesn't. He's run Davao City as mayor for 23 years, and quite successfully. And Davao City is one of the quote-unquote safest and most comfortable place to live in the Philippines. So he brings that with them. Mr. Trump doesn't have that political experience.
So let me bring to another area that before he got elected under the Aquino administration, with the help of the American and Japan, they went to the Hague Court and filed a complaint against China. And I think the court ruling said China lost, okay?
Yes.
And when Duterte took office, he took a 180-degree turn.
Yes,
and of course, there are different reasons he said that in the media. One of the reasons he said is, U.S. has no money, China has.
Yes.
And China has the money to help Philippines to build up the infrastructure and employment. What's your take on that?
Well, two things. One is compared to the other parts of Asia, the Chinese investments in the Philippines are quite very low. But the question is, where are the investments? Most of the investments are in this island, home of Mindanao. The Chinese, there's heavy Chinese importation of export crops, pineapple, bananas, fish, and that comes from the southern Philippines. Second is there is growing Chinese investment in the mining industry. And so in northeastern Mindanao Island, that's where the big deposits of copper, different kinds of metals that China needs are located. And Philippine government have been trying to liberalize mining laws to bring in more investors. American and Australian investors are coming in, but they have to face problems with their environmental groups back home. The Chinese don't have that.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I visited Manila 3 times about 10 years ago, and
Yes.
I noticed that office when I went there through the introduction of my Chinese friends there, and I found that most of the Chinese in at least in the Manila area, I don't know about the other part of Philippines, they do quite well. In fact, they live in residential complexes, pretty secure with guards and stuff like that. And I know that the Chinese has been in other, I don't know about Philippines, like Indonesia or Thailand, the Chinese play a very important role in the business side. So with the warming relationship with China, how do you feel the Chinese Filipino maybe playing a more important role on
well,
the
first
relationship?
culturally, Mr. Choi, the Chinese have always been part of Philippine society.
I see.
My grandfather, for example, his first language was Hokkien,
Okay, okay.
not Filipino, not Cebuano.
Like my mom. My mom was
Yeah.
from Fukien.
Because he was adopted by the local Chinese
see, I see.
family. So there is already that long friendship between Filipino, Chinese, and Filipinos. My mother used to teach piano in my hometown. 95% of her students are Chinese. So when I was growing up, for example, I thought there were two New Years:
Oh, okay.
the Christian New Year,
Okay.
and this New Year we're the only Filipino in the community in the house, and the Chinese grandmothers would teach me how to curse in Chinese.
Okay.
So there is already the deep friendship
I see.
between Chinese, especially outside of Manila.
I see.
Chinese don't need to be protected to live in suburban villages. They're part of the village. They're part of the community. My classmates are Chinese. I think my grandfather's side, we have Chinese blood because I have cousins who are Chinese looking. And so that's a big factor. The second factor really is because Chinese have been, unlike other minorities in, say, Indonesia, the Chinese in the Philippines, hell or high water, if there's a political crisis, they don't get their investments out. They don't take away their investment. They keep in the Philippines. A couple of them left when in the 1980s when there were kidnapping of Chinese businesses, but the majority of Chinese businesses, small, medium, and large, stay in the Philippines. And that's been a big factor in terms of why these governments say, well, the Chinese, they were always with us.
I see.
The third thing is southern China. The Philippines was one of the endpoints of Chinese migration in the 50s, but as far back as the 1930s. So it's silent Chinese. A lot of the Chinese then moved there. China was closed when it became communist, but in 1980, Deng Xiaoping opened China.
Right.
And so these families were reconnected
Right.
again. So if Chinese Filipinos have investments in China, these are mainly in the southern China.
I see. The Guangzhou, the area.
The Guangzhou area, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed there's a lot of Filipino also work in Hong Kong too.
Precisely.
Almost 300,000
Yeah.
of them, yeah.
So if in Indonesia they are anti-Chinese, there's anti-Chinese riots in Malaysia and Indonesia. In the Philippines, you don't see that.
I see, I see.
Especially in the provinces. I grew up in the provinces, and that's it.
So I noticed that, because my wife family was Chinese that moved to Indonesia, generations ago, and they mentioned to me they from time to time, they riot against the Chinese.
Right.
So if Philippines has a more friendly attitude towards Chinese Filipino, and isn't there a shame that it cannot be developed in a more better business relationship with China?
That's developing now.
Okay.
As early as 1980s,
Okay.
for example,
Okay.
Filipino-Chinese began to talk with their cousins they
Okay,
haven't seen
okay.
for a
I see,
while
I see.
in southern China and say, how do we set this up? So one of the Filipino-Chinese families, for example, the C family, has opened up malls in southern China,
I see.
Shumart. And then there's partnership also on export crops, the export of Philippine goods to China. In the past, when China was communist, my mother used to get smuggled goods via Singapore from China. Chinese toothpaste, maling, the spam, the Philippine spam. But now you can buy it anytime there. So I think that will continue to grow, and that's the basis why President Duterte said, well, I like China more than the U.S.
I see. Since I talked to a few elite type of Filipinos, both in the West Coast, in fact, about 4 or 5 in Hawaii, and they are in the business, and they are very connected with the, the American business, and they more or less refuse to, because I want them to talk about more a little bit a good thing about the current president of Philippines instead of attacking him, not. Why the elite and the people that are well connected with American Fortune 100, 500 business is so don't like him at all?
I think it's a double face here. Filipino elites and Filipino American elites supported him because of his anti-drug campaign.
Okay.
So the image of the Philippines from the U.S. and I think Europe is that it's a very unstable country.
I see.
There's lots of criminality going on. And now comes Duterte, that like Clint Eastwood, going to clean that. And that's good for business. What they did not expect, he was anti-American. And so there's this big surprise that he started cursing at President Obama and calling the American ambassador gay.
Okay.
That was something they didn't expect. And I kept telling them that, if you studied him carefully, he's always been that, anti-drugs, but also consistently anti-American.
I see.
Because of some personal experience he's had when he was mayor with Americans.
Yeah.
And so they're surprised now. And I understand why they didn't know much about him, because who knew about Duterte until he won the presidency? He was a mayor. He was known as the Punisher. If you go to Davao, it's a very clean place, but you could not imagine him then becoming president.
I see.
So,
like before the program, we were talking about, maybe he learned a few tricks from the American, a lot of time when American go to China, of course, Obama would not swear in the TV, but they will throw everything from the garbage can to the sink to the president of China before he take the trip to China. I mean, maybe 15 years ago, the Chinese government was real upset, but after all the presidents are doing the same thing, they all know that, it's just a show. I mean, they do it for the local audience. And I guess now when Duterte do it, and then I guess it's a wake-up call for the American. They say, oh my God, we've been doing that to others, How could they imagine a small country like Philippines?
or a mayor, for that matter.
Or mayor, have the nerve, right?
Well, because he's a mayor, as I've mentioned in other forum, local politics, mayor politics in the Philippines, that's how they talk. They curse at each other, they threaten each other.
I see.
And in one forum, I even mentioned that when he started talking like that, he reminded me of my aunts.
Oh, okay.
They curse like that.
I see.
I mean, Filipino mothers are scary.
I see.
And so it's very normal for me to hear that,
Okay.
because I grew up in the South, I grew up in a small town. But Filipinos in Manila, and I guess abroad, are not used to it, because if you become president, you're supposed to learn how to talk in diplomatic language.
That's what they're trying to tell Donald Trump right now.
Yeah, he doesn't care. Duterte doesn't care, because he's very much aware that when he talks, he's talking to Filipinos, not to Americans.
Okay, so we go on for a break, a short break right now. So when we come back, we're going to talk to Professor a little bit more about the exciting and Duterte of Philippines.
Aloha, my name is Mark Shklov. I am the host of Law Across the Sea. Please join me every other Monday to hear lawyers from Hawaii discussing ways to reach across the sea and help people and bring people together. Aloha.
Aloha, I'm Carl Campagna. I hope you please visit us this summer. It's a wonderful summer. It's actually a cooler summer than we're used to. But I hope that you come back and visit us and watch our show, Education, Movers, Shakers, and Reformers, here on Think Tech Hawaii. It's at noon every Wednesday. See you then.
Hi, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. I'd love you to join us every week, Mondays at 2 o'clock p.m. for E Hanakako. Let's work together. We report every week on the good things going on in our state, as well as the better things that can go on in the future. We have guests covering everything from the economy, the government, and society. See you Mondays on E Hanakako at 2 o'clock p.m. Until then, I'm Kili'i Akina. Aloha.
Thank you, Hawaii Asian Review. This is Johnson, trying to host. Our guest today is Professor Abinais. Before we went to commercial, we talked about the way how people talk, in the non-traditional politician say things, which is eye opener with the president of the Philippines now with president of United States. For some people, I think they may like it because before the politician doesn't always tell you the truth. Now at least they speak their mind and they don't have to second guess
precisely.
what they are actually talking about, right?
Right.
One of the big controversy, I guess, one of the American or the Philippine elite doesn't like the new president of Philippines because after he set aside the ruling by the Hague Court, he also say want to get American military out of Philippines. As we may know, that Philippines, there's a country along the Southeast Asia that American use military to contain China, and Philippines is a very important piece of that that pie. And when Philippine president say, "Oh, maybe from now I'm going to work with China more," and worse, he said going to work even with Russia. So that raised an eyebrow for a lot of people. In fact, on TV not too long ago, he said he may not live through his presidency, the 6 years. He said that, not me, okay?
Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of people speculate that who is going to take him out. So I'm not going to go into a conspiracy theory right now. But based on your understanding that what he talked about the military alliance, what's your take on that?
Well, remember the Philippines kicked out the U.S. bases in 1991, and so the U.S. only began to go back to the Philippines and reestablish ties with the Philippines after the global war on terror. So what has happened now is instead of American bases being returned, the push is on joint military exercises between the Philippine and the American military, especially the Marines in Okinawa. The second one is to allow the U.S. Some offices or small bases within Philippine bases. And I guess you're right, it's part of President Obama's pivot to Asia, and the target is, of course, China. When President Duterte said that, there was a lot of controversy and a lot of complaints, in part because of two things. The Philippine military, since 1946, has always been a military trained under the U.S. system. So it's promotions, the way tactics, military education, from the guns down to the kinds of tactics they use, is very much influenced by the United States. And even up to now, Filipino officers are sent first to the United States, second to Australia, and I think Japan, in terms of further training. So there is a tension there because the Philippine military, especially in the South, has been working well with American special forces in containing Islamic terrorists. The Philippine South is like a border. Anybody can go in and out of there. It's a wonderful zone of smugglers and pirates and terrorists. So the special forces, your special forces provide intelligence for the Philippine Marines in that area. Now, if they withdraw, then the Philippines, our military is not as developed as the United States, will have to rely on very primitive intelligence networks. So that's the main complaint. The second complaint, of course, is, if you change to China and Russia, what happens to the guns? What happens to everything, equipment that's is American-based? So you have to transform all of that. Now, that said, there is actually among the senior officers of the military who are also nationalists, who think that even if they rely on the United States and are close allies of the United States, the United States can only say much. This is our army, this is the Philippines. I've met some colonels in the Philippine South who said, sometimes these U.S. Special Forces are just pushing all over the place, and we push back. So there is also that sentiment there. But in general, I think the Philippine military is very much, bothered by his shift to China and Russia.
So actually, right now, the military personnel in Philippines is very limited, more on the advisory capacity, right? Not taking any
And
combat
intelligence.
type of, right?
Well, they say just
They say
intelligence
not, right?
advisory, but
But you
I
never
think
know,
in the
right?
South, they were involved.
Well, American, United States very has a lot actually, bases all around the world. Not necessarily have to be staffed by people, but they are ready. Like overnight or 2 days or 3 days, you can convert into a launching stage or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
But whatever Duterte's warming up relationship with China also becoming contagious in the sense that now other countries like
Malaysia.
Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand always been close to China anyway.
Laos
and,
and Cambodia too.
so it become a very bad influence, I mean, from the American point of view. First, the American and the Japan have such a big showcase of the hate that say, well, China lost the case, right? And the next thing he say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not going to even talk about it for now,
Right, right.
And I know that China also plays smart now. They allow the Philippine fishermen to go back to the dispute island to start fishing,
Right.
without interference. So at least China say, okay, let's set aside our dispute. I mean, when you talk about money, we can always make the money together. We don't
Right.
have to like point gun at each other. I mean, China has always been that attitude. They don't go out and tell you what to do,
Right.
right? If there's money to be made, let's talk about it on the table and settle it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the Chinese way. So the discomfort, also with the new president of United States, they also start saying that if you want me to defend you, pay more money.
Right.
You think that will also, you think he will actually, he told Japan the same thing, told Taiwan the same thing. I mean, you think Philippines will be,
Well, the interesting thing is the Philippines is in the lowest of the totem
I
pole
see,
of
I see.
American interest. Meaning, if you're talking about bases that can be converted into launching pads, you're talking about Japan
I see,
and even Singapore.
yeah.
The Philippines is just, remember the Philippine military, the U.S. military initially was advising the Philippines against counterinsurgents, communists and separatists. So it's an internal force, and it's now just beginning to be an external force. So, so if Mr. Trump says, well, we're not going to pay anymore for military aid to these countries, I think the Philippines will be the last to, will benefit much. And it'd probably be the first to say, okay, we don't care. In fact, there's move now to buy more guns from Israel, or more weapons from Israel, Korea. So there's a diversification apparently. So I stand corrected on my earlier statement. So the ones who will be worried are the countries with the big bases, Japan especially and Korea.
Well, I think Singapore is such a small nation, and even though it's strategically located, I mean it's hard for Singapore to take side and try to play as much neutral as possible.
Right.
Japan, of course, relies so much on the American.
Right.
And actual military, Japan is quite strong. I mean,
Yeah, they're strong, yeah.
They disguise it as a defense force, but who said a gun as a defense weapon cannot use to shoot other people, right? So
Yeah, but the joke in Southeast Asia is they're the worst military
Well.
because they have no combat experience. But I want to go back to this. As the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, they know they're small.
right.
So they're caught between the Chinese and the United States. And if you look at the history of the ASEAN, they know how to play. They play one against each other and to be able to survive. So Vietnam, for example, they're ramming each other's ship with China, but
Right.
Chinese investment into Vietnam continue to grow.
Right.
So this sort of, it's actually an interesting dance that's going on. And I think the Philippines is just starting to learn because the previous president was really pro-US.
Right.
And with Duterte, there's an opportunity there. So let's say if we can do the same dance as the Vietnamese, the Singaporeans, the Cambodians, and the Laos are doing. So it's going to be an interesting time.
You know what I say? Duterte is very smart. When he go to China, he got a lot of loan.
Yeah.
He got an investment, right?
Yeah.
Because he say the right things and he had a warming relationship with China.
Right.
China, you have to understand China. Okay, China historically never want to beat down the nation. They think they're smaller than them. Historically, if you are not going to challenge them, they always give you something,
Yes.
right? And Duterte go to Japan, he played the same game, right? So Abe give him a bunch of stuff, right?
Precisely.
Right? So I think he is very smart. I mean, he know how to play, right? So he doesn't take side. At the same time, he say the right thing to please
Right.
whoever he is talking to.
Right, and that's the characteristics of a lot of Southeast Asian
Right,
leaders
right.
to be able to play, to be able to play the big powers against each other.
But he plays so well in such a short time.
Well, he's played so well, but I had to go back to the long relationship of China. As early as the 12th century, the Chinese were actually trading already with the Philippines. The Manchu dynasty, the Ming dynasty, were treating the Philippine sultanates as tributary,
Right.
but as equal business partners, so that there is a grave of the Sultan of Sulu in Shanghai, I think.
I read
from
that
the 12th
somewhere,
century.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there is this tie that goes on. Even up to now in the southern Philippines, the business group that is able to survive terrorism and kidnapping and all that are the Chinese Filipinos. They don't get touched.
I see.
And so there's that relationship that I think even the Chinese are aware of. One interesting thing that I'd like to point out, the United States interest on the Philippines has gone down. I mean, I teach a course in the Philippines here. I only have 12 students. A course in the Philippines in Xiamen, China, will have an enrollment of 100 students.
Oh, okay.
So there is really, I mean, the University of Beijing has 3 professors specializing on the Philippines. So there is that discrepancy that Americans actually have to take into consideration.
Well, we don't have much time on the show, so I wish I can talk to you more about like the Asian AIB and One Belt One Road. I mean, and eventually they call it the, China's grand plan is to connect the whole Asia by rail, and then I think Philippines is part of the pictures. Yeah. And with the American not approving the TPP,
Right.
and then Japan now is in a panic mode, and I think Philippines is.
Right.
I think Philippines is probably in the AIB already. I don't know whether he actually they put in some money.
I think not yet. I
Not
think,
yet, right? But
yeah.
but I'm sure China will welcome.
Yeah. But the Chinese have built this interesting road from Xiamen down to Bangkok
Right.
through Burma. I think that's
And then they just connect the bridge to Myanmar.
Precisely.
Like 2 days ago, which is a huge
Yeah.
project.
I used to stay in northern Thailand, and
It's
I would
exciting.
see all these Chinese
Yeah.
goods coming through the bridge.
It's very exciting time actually in Asia. I mean, sometimes in Hawaii we don't get much of it, but when I go to California, I do see a lot of happening over there, and people are very excited. And actually, the Filipino community in California is quite active too, in
Yeah.
many ways. In many
Right.
ways, yeah. Okay, so well, we're going to the end of the program. Thank you, Professor Abines, for coming to my program.
Thank you very much.
And
Mr.
I hope to
Choi.
invite you back
Sure, I'd be happy to
sometime
come back.
in the near future to talk more about the
Sure.
exciting relationship between Philippines, America, and China.
Our